Well, in 2011, I and some of my seminary colleagues were invited to deliver a presentation and a panel discussion at our annual Unitarian convention. Think of it like Comic-Con with less costumes. So we are at the National Unitarian Convention, and we've been invited to give a panel conversation, a presentation on a very specific topic: evil. When we got the invitation, we were excited, and so we said yes. We prepared for months together, and we found out that the organizers of the convention had changed our title and changed it to 10 years after 9/11, Young Ministers Talk About Evil, which seemed odd that it mattered why we were young. I'd never, or what that even means. We've never seen a panel discussion called Old Ministers Talk About Stuff. And we wondered if anybody would show up, because evil is not a discussion or a phrase that is common in Unitarian Universalist theological circles. Sin, evil, these aren't words that we throw around a lot, and when we do it with a lot of caveats. And so, of course, on the plane, I get to be working on my laptop with my document titled Evil Workshop, looking over at the person sitting next to me, wishing I had a lair or a cape to wear while we were typing on the plane. We walk into the room wondering if anybody was going to come, and they put us in this huge room, and we thought, oh, it's going to be empty. And by the time it started, it was standing room only. Hundreds of people using their vacation time. They could have been on the beach or at a bar or anywhere else, and there they were, hearing us talk about evil. Why was a convention center hall full of Unitarians, standing room only, for youngins talking about evil? I think it's precisely because we don't talk about it that much that people needed to engage that question. And I'm not shocked that that question came up a number of times in what you submitted to us for this summer series on your questions. Now, the question around what's called the problem of evil in theology, or theodicy, comes from a few basic assumptions. These are mostly Western, mostly Christian, mostly formed by predominantly white male theologians over the last few hundred years, but let's roll with it for just a minute. The premise goes like this: God is all good, God is all powerful, bad things happen, I'm confused. How can all of these things be true at the same time? And you asked us the question about the problem of evil in various forms. Some people said, why do bad things happen to good people? Or why do bad things happen at all? One person in the congregation's question was the flip side of this: why have I been given so much? I spoke to someone last night at a church event who said, I'm less interested in why bad things happen to good people and why good things happen to bad people. We suggested a slideshow I could just play of those people. But underneath is the assumption or the question, to my human mind, things don't look even. Things don't seem even on a cosmic scale. Why? Now, that's an understandable question. Why? And we don't approach a moral answer or a theological answer to evil all too often in this church. One of the reasons is that there's so much bad theology associated with that question. A lot of people blame evil in the world on a sin that happened thousands and thousands of years ago, and we were just lucky enough to be born after it. Some people say that you get to not have to deal with that if you pray the right way or pay the right person or you're part of the right tribe or religion. Not great theology. One of the more modern bad theological responses to that is that you did something. See, once we start asking why, we find that we have to have something or somebody to blame, and we prefer somebody usually. But that somebody is often us. It comes about not just in a fundamentalist theology that says you didn't pray hard enough, but a New Age theology that says you got cancer because you weren't positive enough, because you just didn't manifest enough healing. It's the same basic thought. But at the end of the day, we walk down the road of why long enough, and it takes us to some odd places. And yet, you and I all know that things don't seem fair. That we get sick, and people die, and some people who seem downright mean seem to be given money and power, while other people with genuine, decent, kind hearts are struggling. And this is obvious. Today I want to look at a couple of the ways that we human beings, particularly religious human beings, tend to grapple with suffering and explain it, and why most of those ways are kind of limited. One of the ways that we human beings tend to approach suffering is through the answer of, oh, the world is just so corrupted that real life and meaning and value aren't possible here. You have to wait till you get somewhere else. It's a very common response to it. And this isn't just the Adam and Eve response, although that's a nice prototypical kind of symbolic story. We suffer because they did something wrong. And things used to be great, and now they're not. And they're getting worse, and they're going to keep getting worse. And so real life is to be found over there. Not here, not now, not on these bodies, not on this soil. It's just too far gone. It's irredeemable. And now, my guess is you're not following that philosophy all the way down that path, or else you wouldn't be here. But we fall into that trap too. In a practical way, anytime you've ever talked about the good old days, you're doing a micro version of that theology. It just used to be easier to be a good person back then. Things were simpler in America, or my town, or my church, and with all the changes, it's just not worth it anymore. Anytime you start to believe that the church you're in just isn't capable of it anymore, or the city you're in, or the country you're in, or the body you're in, just isn't the right dwelling place for a meaningful life anymore. We're falling into that theology. This is just too far gone. I'm too whatever to really live right now. How limiting is that? To say, things hurt, I guess I'll just have to not experience life. Another way that we respond to suffering as human beings and religious human beings is to acknowledge that suffering exists, to find a cause for it, and that cause is conveniently them. To externalize evil. Yes, evil does exist, just not here. Not here. It is usually with another group of people, conveniently, who worship or pray or vote or behave differently than we do. Thankfully, they're almost never in the room when we get to make these proclamations. But we know who they are. This is the devil made me do it approach. The idea that there is evil, and that evil over there in some very powerful, malevolent, scary force is really the cause for my pain and the world's pain. There's some social scientists who have been doing really good research on what believing in that does to people. The research studies that I was reading, they abbreviated belief in pure evil to BPE. Sounds like some chemical I should avoid, but BPE. So they would look and identify people's mindsets in either believing in pure evil, BPE, or belief in pure good, BPG. People who believed in something that was purely evil, the devil, those people, tended to believe that people could be evil, that evil people were born that way, that they are irredeemable and unchangeable, and that the only way to deal with those evil people is to preemptively strike through force. You've heard this political rhetoric. When we talk about countries that are an axis of evil, for example, that mindset is at work. An irredeemable group of people over there who are going to harm us unless we harm them first. People who believe in pure evil tended to support preemptive war, the death penalty more often, harsher punishments for crime. And people who believed in pure good kind of did the other option. Now, my guess is that most of us in the room also don't believe that we're consciously holding a group of irredeemable satanic humans who must be destroyed. And yet, in practical fashion, anytime we've thought that things would be better if they just went away, or it would be okay if they were here as long as they were identical to me and my beliefs, we're participating in that mindset. The world is difficult, and I feel pain because of them, or him, or her, or they. But it takes the struggle and pain of the world and says the cause of it is somewhere way out there, and I know where. To think that we could control the mysterious moral forces of the universe in our own brains. The third way I want to engage today is the ostrich strategy. We engage evil by ignoring it, or engage the suffering of the world by pretending it doesn't exist. And this is probably the tactic that Unitarians are guilty of more than the other two. We were founded on a theology of human goodness. Our ancestors said, you were not born depraved, you were born holy, infused with the force of God. That you didn't have to fear being at home in your body or the earth or going to hell. That you weren't just good, you were divine, and that all people were. And that's wonderful. And from the beginning of that period, people were standing on the sidelines going, oh, wow, interesting. People are so good. Why are they doing that? Why slavery? Why torture? Why war? If we're so good, why does that stuff keep happening? And in these circles, it's probably no secret that a lot of folks here, not all, but a lot, tend to support big government regulations. Why, if we believe that humans are so inherently wonderful and divine, do most of us think that they need to be checked on a regular basis? Somewhere in us is questioning the belief that if we just all let things go, everything would be okay. In the middle of the 20th century, James Luther Adams, who's one of the primary Unitarian theologians of that period, visited Germany before the Holocaust was in full force, but after Hitler had taken power. And he participated with people like Bonhoeffer in the Confessing Resistance Church. And when he came back, someone said to him, "What does your liberal theology have to counter evil?" And he paused, and his honest answer was, nothing. And so he devoted the rest of his life to articulating a theology which had the power and oomph to counter fascism. In our workshop, we talked about a professor of ours who said, if your theology looks at a pile of dead bodies and says, that's bad, then your theological toolbox is lacking. And so a lot of what we've done as Unitarians is said the world is good and people are good and we are divine. And then someone says, but why? And we've had a challenge addressing these issues in public. Addressing not just why are people sick because they don't have medicine. I'm not talking about the scientific answer. I'm talking about the moral answer. Why are humans capable of such things? But also from a pastoral perspective, we've been challenged. You are great is a wonderful message, and it's one that I believe. But if someone comes into my office and said, I'm struggling, my body seems to betray me with addiction, and I go, you're great. And they said, but no, I've let down my partner, and I'm feeling shame. And I say, you are great, but I feel alone, and I wonder if I'll be accepted here. You're great. There's only so long that I can simply repeat, you're great. At some point, I have to acknowledge this hurts. This is real. In my life, I bumped up against that in a very profound way. As an adolescent, a member of my family was killed in an act of violence. She was murdered by somebody that we knew. All of a sudden, every box I had to make sense of the world just broke. Just broke. I was a teenager engaging in that problem. God is good. God is all-powerful. This happened. I'm confused. And suddenly, none of those ways of understanding the world was sufficient. I wasn't ready to wait till the afterlife to know what a decent, loving life felt like, or to get an answer. Evil wasn't something that was way out there, and I couldn't bury my head in the sand. I watched as my own family, in reaction to that pain, honestly considered what it would mean to react with violence in response. As a child, I remember overhearing conversations of the adults in the room talking about what might be possible, how angry they were, and what they might do in response. Good people, doctors, nurses, my family, suddenly capable of violence themselves. Found out later that the person who had committed the crime had a pretty serious brain tumor. I don't know if that's why. But the walls between demons and angels, between the good people and the bad people, between those who are capable of violence and those who aren't, just started to disintegrate. And in response, I had to learn to live in a world where pain and beauty were both mine. And the capability for violence was also mine. And compassion, to learn that I'm capable of greed and generosity, that I can be selfish and mean and also really great. It was a wake-up call to what I was capable of. And I'm guessing we are. You see, this church is not about an escape strategy from life. We're not promising you an afterlife or a paradise that doesn't include life's challenges. I can't do that with any integrity. If we promise you that the world is just decaying, then you're going to miss out on the real beauty that exists, and it does. The world is amazing. And if we just promise you that the world is amazing, we're going to be telling you only half the story. It's hard. And there's real pain here. And so our theology and our church and this thing that we're building is not an escape plan, it's an engagement plan. Our job is not to identify who out there needs to be avoided, or which people need to be eradicated, or which world we need to escape to. Our job is to learn to develop the capacity to encounter what is real with a fierce courage. That we do not run away from others' suffering or our own. That we do not run away from our capacity for joy and beauty and generosity. That we learn to make meaning in a world where both exist. Because that world is the only one where you actually have any power. In the world where the great by and by has all the answers, why would you worry? Have fun. Eat, drink, and be merry. In the world where evil doesn't exist, well, okay, no worries. And in the world where it's all their fault, apart from eradicating them, there's not much you can do. This world, the real world where pain and beauty exist, where suffering and joy take hold, the world where you are capable, you, of astounding compassion and violence. That's the world where you get to hold the wheel too. So my question is not why do these things happen, but rather, what now? Not why, but how will we respond to a world in which great beauty and pain exist? The question is, are you willing to use the life you have, difficult as it might be, as a tool to bring more justice and wisdom and beauty into the world? Are you willing to not give up on a country that seems sometimes to be falling apart? Or a family? Or a church? Or a person? Are you willing to admit that no matter how old you are, how many mistakes you've made, or how young you are, or how sick you are, or how anything you are, you still have the capacity to bring light and joy and wisdom into the world? Are you willing to be meaning makers in the real world? Our call is not to escape this, friends, but to see where the world hurts with clear eyes and respond with as much compassion and courage as we can muster. May it be so, and amen.